Hello, I'm Linnie McAdams for Denton County Line. We have visitors from England and Scotland's hospice programs to help out Ann's Haven Hospice here in Denton. Please join us. Welcome to Denton County Line. With me today is Adrian Anderson, who is director of our own Ann's Haven Hospice here in Denton, and also Dr. Tom West, who is medical director for St. Christopher's Hospice, from which the very first hospice, that is the very first hospice in the world, and we feel honored to have you both with us today. Adrian, I am so excited that we have English and Scottish guests in to talk about hospice, and I know you are.
Oh, yes.
And I understand they're here, they're going to help with a seminar for hospice workers, and we'll talk about that a little bit, but let's just remind those people who are looking about Ann's Haven Hospice, which is located here in Denton, and tell me right quick what it does and why we have it.
Okay. Ann's Haven Hospice was the first hospice in the state of Texas. We celebrated our 10th birthday this year, and we care for people who are terminally ill, have a diagnosis of 6 months or less, and live within the limits of Denton County.
And I think in your saying that it's the first in Texas is a rather nice thing for us, a feather in our cap, so to speak, here, that we would have it here. It's named after
Ann Lockwood, who was a physician's wife here in Denton, and because of her courageousness in facing her own death, and because she came from within the medical community, she inspired a group of psychologists, physicians, and other nurses and other medical professionals to look into developing a hospice program for our county.
So having a hospice, a working active hospice, is quite a thing to have, actually, and I think we all feel very fortunate that we do have Ann's Haven Hospice here, because clearly they aren't everywhere, and it has nothing to do with the size of your town, because we're not the biggest one in Texas, and yet we have a hospice, and we feel good about that. Now, Dr. West, we certainly want to talk to you and give you just a hearty welcome to Denton, Texas, and to the United States. This is your second trip. Is this your second trip?
Oh, no, I've been many times. This is the second.
No. I mean for Ann's Haven.
It is, and it's the first time we've ever come to a place twice, and we've come twice because we think it's a lovely place.
And we're so impressed and pleased that you think so much of us that as a hospice director that you would come a second time to help out with this seminar. And well, of course, Adrian's been bubbling since she knew you were coming.
Good.
So we really are delighted. But it's an honor to have someone from the very first hospice. So tell me how long you've been associated with St. Christopher's and a little bit about St. Christopher's Hospice.
I've been there 16 years. St. Christopher's has been there 21 years. And it isn't quite the first hospice, but it's the first of the modern hospice movement, which has now gone right round the world in this 21 years. And what the modern hospice is doing is helping people both within the hospice movement and, I believe, slowly outside the hospice movement, to face the fact of living and of dying, and to be able to do something to help people to live until they die, and when the time comes, to die with dignity, and to help their families at such a time.
Now, you've been there a long time. 16 years is a long time. How did you happen to get involved in the hospice movement rather than a general practice or something?
Well, I worked for 12 years as a missionary in West Africa, which might have been a good start. And then when my time there finished, Cicely Saunders, who founded the St. Christopher's Hospice, asked me to come along and be her deputy. One of my claims to fame is that my own father was nursed at home by Cicely Saunders, and he was in fact the very first patient cared for at home by the founder of the modern hospice movement. Well, so I've had a connection for 30 years.
Oh my, yes. Well, that is very, I really very, very impressed. I really do think we're so fortunate to have you here. I'm just delighted. Now, tell me a little bit about the size of your hospice so we can see how it compares to what we have here in Denton, and then you'll of course have to tell us again how much what you think of Ann's Haven. But how big is
We're a
St.
big one.
Christopher's now?
We're a big one. We've got 62 inpatient beds, and we're looking after 75 patients in their own homes. But we have a huge teaching program as well as caring for patients, and I think that's the reason why we're quite so big. Also, we live in a little place called London, England, which needs a certain amount of care as well.
All right, now you mentioned inpatient care, which we don't do at this point. We don't have a place for inpatient care.
Well, we have hospital contracts and do our inpatient care in the hospital.
Okay, so what you're talking about, do you essentially have a small hospital?
It's called a hospice, and it is a building, and we have both an inpatient facility and a home care program, and they work together, which is very lucky for us.
Okay.
Here they have a home care facility which is superb, and they use hospitals, that's right, isn't it, should the patient need admission to a hospital bed.
Okay, now tell me a little bit about this training you do, and who do you train, and how does that work?
Who do we train? We train young doctors, we train nurses, we train social workers, we train chaplains, we train physiotherapists, and with respect, I think we begin to train the public as well, and the medical fraternity and whatever the female fraternities out in the big wide world. Because what we're doing, a lot of it shouldn't just be confined to hospice, it should in fact be entering into mainstream medicine as well.
Do you find in your short you've been to the United States many times before, but in your trip over here relative to hospice and seeing hospices in the United States, do you find that the medical doctors in the United States are as involved with the hospice movement as are physicians in England? Are we getting there, or what?
I think the straight answer is that not yet are the medical doctors as involved as they are in England. We don't get all medical doctors in England involved either. But I am beginning to meet doctors in this country who are taking a much more professional and deep interest in what the hospice movement is all about, and that's good news.
Now, here, one of the things that I know from the people that Adrian has introduced me to who've had family members go through the hospice, and those people become practically slaves. They are so loyal to Ann's Haven because of the appreciation for what they got out of having Ann's Haven take care of a family member. What kind of response and what kind of family do you develop in England relative to people who go through there and are cared for?
I think it's much the same. We do, of course, have to see a great many people. We have to relate to a great many family physicians. And so maybe for us, the first line family is our own families. That remains terribly important, the support we get back home. And the second line is us, the staff, and the third line is those splendid people, the patients and their families. I think that's the pecking order I'd give us. I don't know whether you'd agree.
That sounds right to me.
As a medical director, tell me something that we need to do or know, or say something about what we're doing in the United States in terms of hospice.
Well, you know, you put your finger on what you need to do already, and that is to get more doctors involved in hospice care. The nurses are marvellous, the social workers are coming along fine, the chaplains are there, the volunteers in this country are far better than anything we can produce in the UK.
Oh, wonderful.
And the doctors are being just a little slow.
Okay, all right. All right. We have two other guests, and so we're going to take a break, and we'll come right back and talk to two others. Stay with us.
Thank you.
Staying with us. We're now talking with Prue Clinch, who is a hospice nurse manager.
That's right.
And Tom Scott, who is a hospice director from Stirling, England. Welcome to Denton, both of you.
Thank you.
Now, Dr. West talked a little bit about his role as director and a little bit about St. Christopher, but the two of you work daily with two other hospices, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, so, and Scott is in Scotland.
That's right.
Told me how to remember that. And Prue, where are you?
Well, I work in England.
You're located
in the
in
southwest,
England.
yes.
Okay.
But I also help develop hospice programs all over England and Wales and Northern Ireland.
All right. Now, Dr. West mentioned the number of inpatient beds and the sort of the size of his hospice, that one is, St. Christopher's is very large. How many hospices are in England? Do you know?
There are
About 120
About 120
inpatient units. Yes.
So now, did you all come to the United States before on the hospice visits?
Yes, we came on the previous visit to
Okay.
Denton.
All right. Now, you're here this time, and I understand you're making only 8 stops in the United States, and they've told me you've been to Connecticut, and you're going, I don't know if you either have been or will go to Pennsylvania, Indiana, Illinois, Colorado, California, stopping off in Denton, Texas, and then on to Chapel Hill, North Carolina.
That's right.
So given the size of the United States, that's really a fairly small number of stops. So we are definitely honored to be a part of that. But it also says that we have, it seems to me, a lot fewer hospices, obviously, than you all do in your area. And clearly you've been at it longer, so there are reasons. But nevertheless, when you've gone to, I only know about Ann's Haven right here, and we think it's absolutely wonderful. You've looked at the others, and you've are going to look at some of those again. Are we coming along quite well in terms of hospice development in the United States? What does it look like to you from your stops? And Prue, why don't you say something as one who goes around and tries to do this?
Well, I think Ann's Haven is special because the depth of the care and the way it relates to each family is what attracts us to come back in a very big way. And it's very similar to the kind of program that I'm involved with in England.
Okay. What about the other programs that you've seen? I'm not asking you to say, you know, who's good and who's bad or anything like that, but are the others getting off the ground well, and or do we have?
Well, we get a very sort of fleeting look.
Okay.
But my impression is that there are some things in which many programs are extremely good at, and there are other things where there are weaknesses.
Okay.
And perhaps 2 of the weaknesses that I think the nurses, as indeed in the UK, need to be much better versed and knowledgeable about hospice care and principles, and then to sell it to their medical colleagues.
Okay, so when you're doing this kind of seminar that you will do here,
Yes.
what are you going to be trying to impart to the people that you speak with in your section?
I think 2 things. One, that what the patient actually wants is the #1 importance, and secondly, that we can all be a lot more knowledgeable and skillful in the way that we use our professional skills to help patients achieve what they want.
I don't know whether you would even know whether we have, how we would get to be as proficient as we need to be in the United States with so few hospice movements right now. I mean, I'm not sure that the training is available. Do you know?
Well, I think that may well be so, but I think training is the key thing,
Okay.
rather than many, many programs. It's people with experience sharing their experience with other doctors and nurses and social workers.
Okay. Tom, now, as director of a hospice in Scotland, is there any difference, I would presume, in your general area? Your hospice movement is about the same?
It's really much the same in terms of the principles and the practice.
Okay.
But each hospice, of course, being in a different kind of area, takes on different characteristics.
All right,
And
now-
that's quite natural.
How big is yours? Is yours a big one like St. Christopher's, or
No,
are you
it's not
smaller?
big. We serve a population of about 330,000 people, and we have 16 inpatient beds, and we have a day hospice where people come, about 12 people each day come, and then a home care program with about 80 people being looked after at home. So that's the size of our hospice.
Well, you see, once again, I think that we may not stop smiling and pushing out our chest around Denton for another month or so after this, because here we are, a city of just over 60,000. Now, the county would have something over 100,000 people, but still that's considerably smaller than some of the areas that, and certainly the area that you're serving. So we feel very fortunate.
Right, and I think you're absolutely right to be fortunate, but I think one of the successful things about Ann's Haven that we've gathered is that the whole community is behind Ann's Haven, and Adrian and others have worked hard at that over the years.
Well, Adrian and the board told us we had to.
Right.
We didn't know we had a choice.
And I think what Tom West was saying earlier is absolutely right, that it's public awareness. As we raise public awareness, so more people want hospice in their own community. And certainly in our situation, we couldn't exist without the support of the community all the time.
Well, tell me, and both of you can respond here, because in England and in Scotland, in that area, when people find that they have terminal illnesses, we have, I guess the thing I think that we see most are probably cancer patients, because of that very definition of a terminal illness and within a specified time. There are not many diseases, I guess, that you can put a time limit on that would fall in that category. So by that, it comes out to be cancer. Do most people, in your impression, in your area, who find that they're terminally ill with cancer, do they prefer a hospice to other care, or what do most people do?
In the district where I work, about half the patients with terminal cancer are referred to the hospice program. But in some ways that gives you a false answer, because as the education spreads, so other people who are not part of the hospice program are also delivering the same kind of care, and that's what we seek to achieve.
I see. Okay. Now, a person is going to their physician, and that's where they get the news.
Yes.
And then it's up to the physician, really, I would assume in most instances, to make this referral, because they, at that time, they may not be thinking very clearly, and certainly not in a position to look for resources of what do I do. So are your physicians, do most of your physicians make the referrals, and then perhaps do some people choose otherwise, or do you still have a number of physicians who don't make the referrals?
A very small number now, after 12 years.
Okay.
But initially it was hard to sell the idea.
Okay.
Yes, and hard to sell the idea to the public initially, who thought hospice meant the end of the road, whereas now they know that the help of the hospice may mean that they live for many months, sometimes a year or more, with much better quality of life.
All right, now here the person must have been told that they have 6 months or less to live. Do you use the same time frame?
Not in our case. We don't have to use the 6-month period only. And as Prue says, some people are referred, well before their death, even a year or more,
okay,
and come in and out of various kinds of hospice care according to their particular need.
Oh, well, tell me a little bit about that, Nancy. Maybe that'll be our next step.
Let's imagine someone is referred to our hospice.
Okay.
And initially, they don't need to come into the inpatient unit. They can continue to be cared for at home, but perhaps home can be helped if they come into the day hospice, say 2 or 3 times a week, to give the family a break, or say bathing's difficult at home, so that they can have a bath in the hospice and not have to come in and stay there. They just come in during the day. And then, as and when they really do need to come in for intensive care in the hospice, then they can come in and then go home again once whatever problem it is has been solved.
Okay.
So it's a matter of coming in and out, as I say, of various kinds of care over quite a long period of time.
And Prue, in your area...
My program is the same, but we only have, with 150 patients being visited at home at any one time, we only have a 6-bed inpatient hospice, and that's proved to be enough beds. So most people are either having home visits or are coming into daycare, although they all enjoy the thought that the hospice could have them as inpatients if they needed it. They think of it like a 5-star hotel.
Oh, yes. Well, how very nice. But do you have occasion when you don't have enough staff to care for the people who need you, or are you staffed with sufficient volunteers and all that pretty much you can take care of as many as you have?
We seem to be able to, on the whole. There have been times in our development in our hospice where we've had people waiting for the particular kind of care they need and want. But now we've got the measure. But more and more people are being looked after, just as here, not just by the hospice, but through the work of the hospice into the hospital too, so that the skilled care and understanding in the hospital setting is getting better because of the hospice, and I'm sure that's happening here too.
All right, let me ask you this. As a director of a hospice, surely many times Adrian and others have said why one believes here that hospice care is preferable perhaps to some other things. I want to know if they use the same kind of reasoning in England and Scotland. So tell me, why do your people want to be in a hospice as opposed to perhaps just being hospitalized or something? What do they say? What are the thoughts?
Because I think they find that they can choose what things they can do rather than having some kind of program forced on them. We try to leave the right to choose to the patient and the family for as long as possible, in fact all the way. And that's the difference between being in some kind of hospital program.
Prue,
I think
what
there's
do you
another
find?
very important reason too, is that we do know in hospices how to control their physical symptoms. And I think in the UK, the education programme has been going a long time, and so we've almost begun to assume that that's something which will happen. And we're looking at the other reasons people ask for hospice in more detail. But originally, hospice grew out of a great need to help control people's physical distress when they'd largely been dismissed as nothing more could be done for them.
What kind of response do you get from families, and are they a part of your volunteer staff? Well, first of all, do you have volunteer staff the way we do here at Ann's Haven?
No, I think as Tom was saying, your volunteer programs are far more advanced than ours. We do use volunteers. For example, we have volunteer drivers bringing our patients in and out of the day hospice, or we have bereavement visitors going into family homes after someone has died. But you make better use of the lay public in that way.
Do you all use some volunteers, but not as much?
We use volunteers too, and we use them in patients' home, but I entirely agree with the others. I've learnt so much from visits to the States about better use, more adventuresome use of volunteers. Yes.
When you talk, simply because I'm not familiar with the area, when you talk about your hospice and you talk about the size of it, geographically, do your people have to travel very far, or are you rather dense in population so that they don't travel so far?
In my programme, 80,000 of a 400,000 population live in the city, the rest are rural, and some of the day patients may do 80-mile round trip to come to daycare.
Oh my. Now, does that pose a problem getting there?
It means they're very tired for the next 2 or 3 days after they've been to daycare, and they reckon it's worth it. They've enjoyed their day out so much. But it's expensive for us as a programme to provide that kind of transport for people over long distance.
Do you provide the transportation for the most part rather than the people themselves?
Almost entirely. And what happens is that volunteers, as in your programme, do the transport, and we reimburse them at a very sort of low rate for the actual cost of gas and their expenses.
Now, do your people have to travel very far? Or
Not quite as far as that, about 20 miles each way for a visit.
Okay.
That would be about the maximum.
Okay.
So it's not too bad.
And do you also provide the transportation?
Exactly. Almost exactly the same. Pay just enough to supply people's gas. And the volunteers are very happy to take this job on board, because they become really very good companions to the patients as they drive them in and out. And they play a very important role.
Do you, and then I will ask again then, of those people who are family members now, and do they become volunteers? That's one of the ways that I know that Adrian and the board has gotten volunteers, is when someone has had a family member there, then they were so pleased at what they saw that they wanted to make sure that Ann's Haven would go on. So they volunteer oftentimes in various capacities. And I was wondering if your family members would choose to volunteer. Do they often do that?
Yes, quite a lot. Not. I would say less than half probably actually volunteer, because so many of our family members are older people anyway, who probably can't do much voluntary work.
I see. All right. Before we run out of time, I want each of you to tell me if there's something else that you think we should be doing to make our hospices better, and if not, just give me your impression of what you think about ours.
I don't think any of us actually arrive at the perfect hospice. You go on learning from each other, and I think anything that we can do to exchange our experience and to encourage each other is all to the good, both sides of the Atlantic.
Okay. Tom?
Quickly, I would say that most hospice programs have what we might call a concentration of experience, that other units and other personnel don't have about meeting the needs of cancer patients and their families. And we need to take that experience and build it into education programs, and so share what we've learned, both from our patients and their families as well as from our medical and nursing knowledge, so that it can be practiced, not just within hospice, but within hospital and the community setting as well.
Well, it's that idea of kind of expanding this to the community is a wonderful idea, to get it beyond just the hospice situation itself. And I want to say some appreciative things about the fact that you all come. You're saying that this education and sharing of the knowledge is one of the things that we need to do, but you've come so very far across the Atlantic to help us out with educating people here in the United States, and we certainly do appreciate that. And we appreciate the fact that you've come to Ann's Haven on 2 occasions. We're very honored about that. And we hope that we are learning something. I know that Adrian has said that of the people registered for tomorrow, that we have a number of people from outside the state of Texas. People are coming from Oklahoma, Arkansas, and other areas, perhaps more outside even than there are people coming from here. And so you're going to have a wonderful opportunity to help us with educating, and I don't know whether we'll ever get a chance to turn that around, but we hope.
It's definitely mutual. We gain a great deal from being here and from being in this country, generally.
We have, I know you've talked to Adrian about what kind of staff we have of counselors and all that. Are your staff similar in terms of makeup of who you have on board? You have the doctors, you have nurses.
Yes. Very similar.
Okay.
Very similar.
And one of the big parts, and you mentioned there, so I know you must do some of that, you mentioned the bereavement group.
Yes.
That goes out after the death of the person. How long do you kind of stay in touch with your family members after the death?
Well, obviously, it does depend on that particular spouse or family in terms of what they want. But often it's about a year or sometimes a little longer.
Okay, but they don't get just dropped right away.
Oh, no, by no means.
All right. Now, you're going to be here helping us tomorrow. After that, you're going to go on to Chapel Hill. I certainly hope you're going to get to see a little bit more of Denton, Texas.
So do we.
I, for one thing, it's a wonderful place to be, but I am truly delighted that you all came. I know you just flew in, and it was a terrible imposition to ask you to come and do this for us. And I am so very grateful, and Channel 25 feels honored to have you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, and good luck tomorrow and in the days to come. And thank you for joining us on Denton County Line. Please join us again next week. Good night.